was it, huh?
Yeah, we invited five board members in accordance with the rules.
Yeah.
And we're required to have a quorum of 3, so we've met the quorum requirement. We have, in order to hear items, what is it, 2 and 3. Actually, let me pause for a moment. Crystal, have we let City TV know that we're recording? Okay.
But are they on? But are they
started?
recording right now?
There's 3.
Thank you.
He's got your minutes, so got it laid out, I think. Don't you have your agenda there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just right here. Mission Ridge.
That's one of them.
Okay, so in order to hear items 2 and 3 on the agenda today, since they're accessibility related, we need to, the state law requires that we have at least 2 of the members of the hearing body recognized as disabled or impaired. And today we do have that. We were a little concerned that we might without having Ken here. But Bonnie and Vince are 2 impaired or disabled board members who will help us evaluate the accessibility items. And that's an important part of the state law that we want to make sure we're complying with. So with that, I think if the chair and the board are ready, you can start the meeting. Make sure everybody's got their green light on their microphone and that they speak closely and into the microphone when they talk.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Your mic's on?
Roll.
I don't think your mic's on.
Yeah. Didn't it?
Well, let's turn yours on.
There.
too.
No.
Oh, mine should be on. I'm going to keep mine off so you won't be able to hear me. Good morning. Roll call. Bonnie Elliott?
Here.
James Langhorne?
Here.
Ken McClellan? Absent. Vincent Wood?
Here.
At this point, any public comment? General business? No?
Mr. Chair, we have a card here for, it says Bath Street, but I think, Jim, did you want to?
Public comment at the bottom there.
Oh, general comment? Okay. Come on up and use the microphone there. Make sure that green light's on for Jim. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Marston from the Access Advisory Committee. I just want to point out how important this group is. We have a lot of rules in this country about not discriminating against different people. And yet, for some reason, the California Code says that you folks have the right to tell people they can't get access to certain buildings or programs. So that's a very big responsibility that you have. You can't do this for racial groups or for gender groups, but you can also say, hey, you guys aren't allowed to get free access. So I want you to understand how important that is. And one thing I want to point out that Andrew has mentioned before is these decisions are based on estimates, that they're not really fully fleshed out. We don't know where the numbers come from. So there's 2 things to be able to get out of having to do this kind of stuff. One is to lowball your overall cost of construction, and the other is to highball the cost of accessibility. Now, last year I think we had an applicant who said it would cost him $4 million to put in an elevator. They didn't even examine other options. So, of course, they got their waiver. So you as a group really have the responsibility to ask questions about where these numbers come from. And if I look, I see we have members of the planning staff here. These people have looked at these plans originally and said a certain code is required. Then it was overturned or a waiver was offered. So these people here in the audience know why it was there in the first place. And one of your points 3 and 4 and 5, Andrew, don't really seem to be covered as far as what is the impact on the disabled. So I just want to say that I think it's a very important job that you have, and you can't just accept anyone's numbers without asking, is there an alternative to do this a cheaper way? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? At this point, we'll move to approval for the minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion?
Oh.
To approve the minutes from last meeting? I wasn't here, but.
Okay.
I make a motion we approve the minutes from last meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the secretary is asking if you can say your names when you, Mr. Chair, when you recognize the motions and the seconds, would you just say motion made by Mr. Wood, seconded
Yes.
by Mr. Langhorn?
Okay.
And then she can keep the minutes. Otherwise, we have to go back and listen to the
Yeah.
recording and try to figure out who said what. So
Vincent Wood was, and James Langhorn was the second. At this point, I think we are going to move to the subject items 2130 Mission Ridge Road, access, compliance, hardship. City like to,
Mr. Chair, I think
Yeah.
we're going to.
Oh.
Hang on a second here.
did I miss something?
You've got a couple you're gonna,
Huh?
I thought we had the rules of the board up first.
Oh,
We do.
we do.
So there's no staff report for it, but item 1 on the agenda is review and confirmation of the meeting rules of the board. It's on the agenda, so there's no packet for it. Is there? Oh, okay.
You must be missing something.
Yeah,
where is it?
This one right here.
I don't think it ended up in the working minutes. Yeah. Yeah. So can you, Crystal, can you make sure that all the board members have a copy of that? Thank you. So Crystal's going to hand out to you the rules of that. Actually, it's just a handout that was prepared. We don't have a record of the actual adoption of these rules. And these came up at our last meeting, this question of how long do the appellants have, how long does the city have, when do things have to be submitted, how do they have to be submitted. We thought it was prudent after conferring with the city attorney's office that we bring these rules before the board and have them discussed and hopefully adopted unanimously so they become the official rules of the board, and we have a record of doing that in the minutes of the board. So any future questions, we can say no on whatever today is, the 14th of June, we approve those rules, and those are the rules that we follow. And that'll help us avoid some of the very lengthy presentations that are kind of overwhelming to get 158 pages of PDF information dropped on you in an hour or two during a board meeting. So what we've done, you'll notice if you look at each one of the item packets for today, they all close with the copy of those rules because we want everybody to know the rules that we are operating under. And I've confirmed that through our adopting ordinance of the codes, these rules are not in conflict with any of the other rules that the board follows. So these are supplemental. These rules that are before you today for discussion and hopefully adoption are the rules that help our meetings move expeditiously, but also they help the community have access to all the information that's going to be provided 10 days before the hearing so that everybody in the community knows what's going to be provided and has an opportunity to understand it, and everybody can be aware of what's going to be presented and be prepared to give their testimony in a concise manner for the benefit of the board and the community. So with that, I think Crystal probably went out to make copies. If you actually look at item 2, the very last, I think there are 3 pages. You'll have what she's going to make copies of for you. It starts with the appeal hearing procedures, City of Santa Barbara, appeal hearing procedures. So this is what she's making copies of for you individually. And these were included in the packets that were mailed out to you 10 days ago and emailed to you 10 days ago. So specifically, if you look at the first page, appeal hearing procedures, and you go to the back of that page, it says appeal number 3, appeal hearings held by the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. And then it gives the time limits. So that would limit speakers. My presentation to 5 minutes and an appellant's presentation to 5 minutes. Now, there's also an asterisk at the top of that, and it does say at the bottom that the board does have the discretion to allow more time if you'd like, but it puts the board in control of the length of the testimony rather than the other way around. And then the next page is written correspondence, and there's direction there that directs people to give us their written information 10 days before the meeting so that we can make copies and get that to you. And then you have 10 days to look at it, and you're not trying to digest, like last time, 158 pages in an hour. And then the appeal hearing guidelines are just general information. So with that, I would encourage the board to discuss this if they feel necessary and move to approve the hearing rules and procedures that are presented by staff this morning. And if anybody would like an additional copy by itself, there are copies here and we can make them available.
Grateful
If
for
any
it.
of the board would like make any comments or have any questions?
No, I don't have
Now's
any
the time.
questions. I don't have any questions.
Yeah.
I'm
Mr. Chair?
pleased with this.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Mr. Chair,
Yes. Jim.
I wanted to thank staff for this. He knew how urgently I needed this about a few weeks ago, so thank
Yeah.
you.
Anyone like to make a motion to approve these?
I'll make a motion to approve these procedures, these guidelines. The rule.
Bon-
I'm not sure quite the wording, sorry.
And Bonnie has approved is the first. Is there a second?
Second.
Vincent Wood, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So now we can move to the next item if you'd like.
Item up for discussion is 2130 Mission Ridge Road. If staff would like to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, Lonnie, did we want to have someone come up after I introduce this to give the details on this? Or just respond to board questions? How did we didn't really talk about that. Okay. Okay. Mr. Chair and Board, we have a access compliance hardship ratification. These are fairly common for us. This one's unique in that the location of the property is such that there are no public sidewalks that can easily connect an accessible route along the public right-of-way, where we might have a campus that has a change in elevation or obstacles that can't be easily navigated with an accessible route of travel for someone with mobility impairments to get from one part of the campus to the other. Sometimes we'll allow them to go to the public right-of-way and then use the public sidewalk and come back in on another accessible route to access those other parts of the campus. But in this case, there is no sidewalk. And for more details, we have our plans examiner and our certified access specialist, Elizabeth Sorgman, here, who can answer questions if you have any. But this is a kind of a standard or a routine ratification of a hardship.
Thank you. It's, would you,
Elizabeth, she's available if you'd like to
Yeah,
call her up for
would-
questions. You can, but
did you want?
I don't know if the applicant is here. Oh, do you want to come up? Okay. Is your mic on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so but we only need to respond to questions of the
Okay.
board. So.
So did you have any specific questions that you want me to answer?
I have some comments.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this situation's really awful and deplorable. I think to put for a school to put one subject, a classroom of any topic, especially robotics, is to put it to put it in a place where it's not accessible to people in chairs is awful. I think the cheapest way to go on this is to just move the location of the class and don't have any classes up there where it's only certain students can go. I think that's to have any place of education that is inaccessible to everybody is not okay. Whatever the topic is, whatever the subject, whatever the class is. I think this ratification is not acceptable to me at all. Move the classroom, something. Make that building that's being used for robotics, make it a storage unit so no student has to go up there. Something. Right?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like Elizabeth and the applicant to, because I believe that there might be a misunderstanding as to the level of accessibility at the property. So it might be good to talk about, because it is on an accessible route. The problem, I think, is, if I understand it correctly, the lower part of the campus does not have an accessible route other than getting in a vehicle and driving to the accessible parking space at the upper part of the campus. So all the campus can be accessed by people with mobility impairments, but they can't go throughout the campus. No?
No. Do you want to talk about how the school is divided, or?
I mean, there's sort of
use the microphone, please.
This is James Blair, and I'm with Native Sun Design Studios. There's a lower campus and an upper campus.
Correct.
And
yeah.
so we have handicap parking and accessibility at the lower, and then at the upper, but there's a significant grade change. I think it's 400 feet or something between the two. And so that's the problem, is that getting from the lower parking up to the upper campus, and so you would have to enter a vehicle to get from one section of that campus to the next.
But my question is, why have anything up there, up in a spot where you have to drive it has to be that much of a different elevation? I don't get it. I don't understand that.
I'm not able to answer how the school's programs work, but they do have the upper grades on one level, and I think the lower grades on the lower level. That's just how the campus it functions. And so when they came in to change of use of this particular building, the way that they operate, everyone drives onto the campus, drops off their students and parks in the upper parking area. So there isn't a public sidewalk from Tremonto to be able to get onto the campus. And we did really struggle with how do we do this. If we provide an accessible route, which is required, to the public way, they could probably do that, but I'm taking them out to a street that has no sidewalk, and so I'm putting people in a chair in a more dangerous situation. So really then we had to look at how do we get access from the lower campus to the upper campus, and what's that going to cost? And it's not easy. They had someone take a look at ramps, how many lineal feet of ramps that would take, what the cost would be. So that outweighed the costs, trying to make the connection between the two campuses. Really to provide an accessible route from that building to Tremonto, it makes no sense. And I would be jeopardizing people putting in there. And the other option is just going to cost more than what they had anticipated, and more than what their project would cost. I'm sorry that they're not here to answer the why their campus works that way. So we can only look at, does it seem to be, not make sense in terms of their budget. ADA isn't meant to bankrupt someone. It's meant to provide as much access as we possibly can. And given what they're doing and that the building already exists and they're renovating it, it seemed to make sense to be supportive of what they were asking for.
Oh, I disagree.
Okay.
Is the problem just getting from the lower campus to the upper? Is the problem just from getting to the lower campus to the upper campus?
Well, there's two problems. One is getting them to the public way. So we can't get them to a public sidewalk. So then the other option is if we can't get them to a public sidewalk, get them down to the lower campus, but there's such a huge elevation drop that it wasn't possible. So we did ask them, please explain what the program is. If someone comes to visit, what do you do? And so in your packet is what they describe as, what arrangements, what accommodations they make for someone that's disabled to be able to visit the upper campus if they park at the lower campus.
Well, they could just drive up there, right?
Yes.
I'm familiar. I was raised on Alameda Padre Serra.
Yeah.
So, that's a very old campus.
Correct.
Yeah, they could just go over to Mission Ridge and then back up Tremonto and into the driveway.
Right. And I understand the concern of Bonnie is that a student trying to make that trek, it would be hard because there has to be a program on campus that puts them in a golf cart or something to be able to get them up rather than driving them around.
And if they're in a power chair, they're not going to fit in a golf cart. Can they get up on the hill on their own,
Well, and I think it might be good to reiterate that the campus is also divided by age, and so from what I understand, the younger kids are on the lower campus and the older kids are on the upper campus, and so I don't know that the younger kids would ever actually use the robotics lab that is what's proposed. I think it's for the older students to use, so that would not be as big of an issue because they wouldn't be on a regular basis going between those two places.
Okay. Well, I don't know anything about the campus except what I read here, and I've never don't have site visits, so I haven't seen it either. But this whole thing is just really quite troubling to me. The way it sounds like segregation. It's like, oh, they're disabled. We don't need to educate them. That's what it sounded like to me. It's what I don't like it.
Board have any other questions or comments? But I think, Bonnie, they would. I mean, I see where they would still though have access if they were. I mean, they could still go to school there.
But if they were if they were an older student and like I can say I don't know how the campus is divided up. If all of the it sounds like what you just said was the older students are all on the upper level completely. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's how that's my understanding.
Okay, but are you sure? I mean, there's no representative.
I'm fairly certain on that's where.
What I would imagine that having had 3 kids that went to different campuses, that there's times where they do probably share facilities, and at that point there probably is an issue. But the school's not here to describe their program. I wish they had been.
Yeah, why aren't they here?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add, if you'll turn to page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The back of page 7. Excuse me. The back of page 7 for this item, you'll see Native Son Design Studio letterhead with an explanation of how they do accommodate. This is actually a process that was adopted early in the ADA guidelines back in the 90s. We saw it more commonly at mountain retreat centers, ski areas, locations where it was just topographically impossible to put in a route of travel, and so they would provide a shuttle service. Mm-hmm. So I'd like the board just to take note of the second sentence, middle paragraph there. When a disabled parent, student, or visitor needs access from the lower campus to the upper campus, the school provides a shuttle service, either via golf cart or accessible van. So they have provided an equivalent accommodation. The student doesn't have to drive themselves. The shuttle van, accessible van, is there to take them throughout the campus. But it is the only way they can navigate 400 feet of elevation change.
Okay. And I did read this, but okay.
I'd like some clarification. And what are we voting on?
So the item before the board is that my office has approved hardship, and we're bringing it before the board for ratification. The board will either say, yes, we agree that's a hardship, or no, we don't think that's a hardship and it should not have been approved.
Well, so am I right in saying, and you agree, that it isn't a hardship as long as the school provides a van, a golf cart, something to take a student that's inaccessible or whoever wants to visit from the lower campus to the upper campus to this building.
Correct, Mr. Chair, Board Member Wood. That was one of the key pieces of compliance that we were alternative compliance we were looking for before we approved.
Then I'll move we ratify this appeal.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
It's okay. Thank you very much.
Next item is 2320 Bath Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure. We have some folks from Pueblo Radiology here, and Elizabeth and Christy Foreman was the plan checker on this, so they can answer any questions you might have. But the city will stand on the staff report that was made. Add just some context. So this is another ratification.
Yes.
Sorry, I know. I know what's.
We
on the
figured it
agenda.
was.
You guys might not.
We thought it was.
So this is another hardship ratification, and staff has looked at this to try and determine if the request for hardship for providing an accessible elevator from between these two levels of the or these levels of the medical building, the hardship of paying for that elevator replacement was reasonable given the cost of construction. And we did have input from Will Railing of the Accessible Santa Barbara group that was emailed out, I believe, yesterday, Crystal? Is that when we sent that out?
Yeah.
Yeah, the public comment. And there are copies here if people would like to see it. And he brings up a good point. It is a point that we do look at. If equipment is hardwired into the building, we consider that equipment to be part of the construction, and that valuation needs to be included. If it's plug and cord, we don't, because we consider it portable. Some of this equipment, though, can be plug and cord and can be fairly large equipment. So staff is comfortable with the board's direction on this. If the board, relative to Mr. Railing's comments, if the board feels that equipment needs to be included in the overall valuation, we can have that form adjusted by the applicant. But we would still. Staff struggled with this. This is a real difficult one. Medical facilities are held to a different standard. This is not like a school. This is not like a jewelry shop we've seen or some other commercial facility or an office building. Medical facilities there's liability that's going to be carried by the medical facility when they do this, because they are required by state law to have an elevator. They have different standards for this. So we're applying the unreasonable hardship criteria to it, but quite honestly, I don't think any of us in building and safety were 100% sold on it. This was definitely one of the more touchy judgment calls for us. So the board should probably keep that in mind when you're looking at this hardship ratification.
Could I ask for a clarification? Are you saying the fixed equipment was not included in the original estimate or not?
It's my understanding that it was not. Well, the fixed equipment was, but not the plug and cord. But Christy can respond to that if it's one of the board's questions. So we don't take.
It wasn't made clear if it was a plug-in equipment or hardwired.
So just to keep the meeting kind of in order. So the way if you're a member of the public and you want to make a comment, like Jim just did, a question, you place the question before the board. You say, I think the board should ask what equipment was plug and cord, what wasn't. And if the board would like to entertain that question, they'll give that question back out to staff to answer the question. Does that make sense? So that the conversation isn't happening out in the audience, it's actually happening through the board. We have a good record of it on the microphones. So we do have a speaker on this one. Jim, did you want to speak on this one? I guess.
Yeah. We're kind of getting it.
Want to come up to the. Come up to the.
Get up there.
Last time we had the comments on this, it was after the board had discussed it. I'd also had a comment ready for the last thing, and I wasn't called, and now I'm calling first. I don't mind, but it's just we have to get this organization right. Either it's after the board. Okay, my biggest question here was this elevator is not in the office building. It's on the outside of the big building. It's a 3-story building, very large. I don't understand why somehow the landlord is not required here. What I'm afraid is every tenant who's there is going to eventually have a renovation, and each one's going to say, oh, it's going to cost me too much to fix the elevator. So it doesn't get fixed, and it doesn't get fixed, and it doesn't get fixed. It's mostly all medical stuff there, and I don't know if you have a power to do this or ask, but the land, it's an outdoor, like I said, it's an elevator that serves the floors, not in the office. Now, from what I read from the paper here, it says that they're going to make, their staff will be instructed on how to help people use the elevator. And I hope that the board can ask the specific question, what the heck do they mean by helping people use an elevator that's not to code compliance? I was there. I don't see what they're going to do. There was no signage saying if you have help, if you need help using this, go to this door. So as a user, I wouldn't know where to go to ask for help in the first place. That's in your paper, so please see if you can get the applicant to explain what their procedure is. And also a bigger question to Andrew and the board, why can't the building owner be brought into this and distribute the cost to all the tenants? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mom.
Yeah, I was there. I've gone to that building before, and I went yesterday to check out the elevator again just to make sure of stuff. And I have a small chair, and it's a tight fit. It's not the I would not ratify that. I would not accept. This is not acceptable to me either. It's a medical building, and I did find out yesterday for the first time. I didn't realize that it's rented. It's somebody else owns the building, and so Mr. Marston brings up a good point. Why isn't the building owner here? Because this is not right. This is not okay. So it's just really tight. So, and also I went to when I went yesterday, I went to one elevator. There's 2 elevators actually on the ground floor, and one of them apparently doesn't. I don't know if they all go to the top or whatever, but first elevator I went to had a huge trash can in front of the buttons. I can't get to it. A person standing can get to the buttons, but I couldn't. So, but the correct elevator, I went and talked to somebody in the MRI. I forget which office I went to, but they showed me the right elevator, and I got to the buttons, but it was really hard. I could barely turn around to get out. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair, we do have another public speaker.
Okay.
Wayne Baldwin, who's the CEO of Puebla Radiology.
Thank you for considering this. Puebla Radiology has been in town for almost 60 years. We deal with people who have mobility issues every day as part of our practice. People don't come for an MRI, and typically unless they have a problem moving. And we've never had an issue because we take care of our patients. And one of the things that was I want to make sure it's completely understood. We have a downstairs office and an upstairs office. So people can check in downstairs. And those people, if they have problems getting around, we'll take them around. That's not the issue. The issue really is a technical compliance with the size of an elevator cab. And if you look through the materials, you'll see pictures. We've used an MRI wheelchair in some of the pictures, which is an extra wide wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And you can see kind of how it fits in that elevator. There are panels on the inside of the elevator, which I think we intend to remove and replace with a grab bar, as was recommended by the Independent Living Resource Center, who came out and looked at it. And you're right, it's a medical building. We're held to a higher standard. We realize that, and we have to take care of our patients, and we take that very, very seriously. We've expended a lot of effort and energy in training our staff on how to deal with mobility issues. We have to get patients on and off gurneys and tables, and people who are unable to do that on their own because they're not ambulatory for any number of reasons, whether they're permanent or temporary. And those are the things that we deal with every day in our practice because of the nature of our practice. And so this particular elevator that goes, there are 2 elevators, as been mentioned, and they are on the outside of the building on both ends of the building. The elevator to the south is the one that accesses the second floor where this particular office is being remodeled. It's an office remodel. We're trying to make it better for our patients, not worse. And so as part of that, if patients have mobility issues, again, whether they're temporary or permanent, we will make sure that they are able to get where they need to go. If you read the report from the Independent Living Resource Center, they indicate that it should work, that there shouldn't be an issue. We looked at a couple of different options and trying to figure out whether we could make this work one way or another. I think the comment about where's the owner of the building is a good one, and I'm sure that they probably would not like to foot the bill of a $400,000 elevator, which would make it $800,000 if you had to do 2 elevators right in the building. So that's an issue that they'll have to deal with someday, I imagine. But for us, we're committed to making this work, and the non-compliant aspect of this is really a matter of inches. The cab is not deep enough. It's wide enough, but not deep enough. And so we tried to make as many accommodations as we could in our planning. But at the end of the day, it was a really expensive upgrade to try and put another elevator in there. So this is why we're here. And there's probably a whole bunch of different things that you could try and look at and do. But at the end of the day, our commitment really is to our patients and to make sure that our patients have access to all the care that they need. And we think we do a pretty good job. We get a lot of very positive patient comments from our patients, and we take that very seriously. So at the end of the day, we're hopeful that we can actually go through with our remodel. It's basically for a women's imaging center where women who need mammographies and ultrasounds and that sort of thing can have a separate place for them where there's not men walking around, where there's, where they can be more comfortable and getting their care that they need. And so as a result, that's why we were doing the remodel that we're doing. And because of the expense of it, frankly, and some of the accoutrements, shall we say, some of the finishes and fixtures that we're putting in to try and make it a nice place for them, it's kind of jacked the price up a little bit. So part of that is why we're here today. But we think we've done everything we can do to address the question. And if there's anything else that we need to do to address a question, certainly we're willing to do that. But we've had a couple of different contractors come and look at it, give us a couple of different bids on how we could reconfigure the elevator shafts, a different type of elevator, all those kinds of things. And every time they came back, it was a pretty substantial increase in the cost of the project. So that's why we're here. And I hope that you can kind of work I know there's a lot of material here, and I apologize for that, but hopefully you can work your way through the process, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
I have a question. There's no way, what you're saying then, there's no way a person would be going up to the second floor without checking in on the first floor. They
may try, but typically what we'll do is if one of the questions that we ask when I shouldn't say 100% of the time, but if the staff is doing what they're trained to do, one of the things that they will ask when a patient calls to schedule an exam is, are you ambulatory, right? Do you have any issues getting around? And if they are, if they do say they have, a problem, if they're in a wheelchair or whatever, then we'll have them check in on the ground floor. Mm. And the way the elevator is actually configured, the opening to the elevator is almost directly across from the entrance to our main office, ground floor office there. So if you're going to Pueblo Radiology for your care, you'll see the door there. There's a big kind of awning over the door, and it's pretty easy to spot. So if you've got any kind of questions, it's pretty easy to know where to go. But again, we try and head that off at the pass. You know, when somebody calls and they're scheduling their exam, we want to know any issues that they're going to have so that they're taken care of and their experience is good. So, and that's important for us for a number of reasons. One is that, for example, if it's an MRI patient, getting them up onto that gurney can be a challenge. And so we have a lift that, you know, that is designed just for that purpose, whether it's a CT or an ultrasound or whatever it might be. That lift would need to be engaged so that that patient can have access to whatever modality they're coming to have their study on. So we do have to kind of triage the patient a little bit from that perspective to make sure we know what issues they'd have and have an access.
I have a question about, you said I've recently learned renting and this and that. Cottage Hospital's just redoing they're making their own city over there in that whole block area. So are they going to take you guys over? And if they are, include, where are they?
We are completely independent from Cottage Hospital.
Okay.
We have no connect. Well, I shouldn't say that. We do work at Cottage Hospital in Goleta and in Santa Ynez, but not in Santa Barbara.
Okay,
it's a different radiology group that handles the downtown Cottage Hospital.
Okay.
And
because I know Sansom is going to combine with them at some point.
Well, we don't know that. The FTC has not made their ruling on whether they're going to allow that to go forward.
Okay, I know that was what the hope is. So I
think that's their hope. I think there's a lot of other doctors in town who hope it doesn't happen, but
yeah.
Whether that happens or not, I don't know, and I don't have privy to that information. But we are completely independent from Cottage Hospital, or Cottage Health System, who I believe is actually the owner of the building.
The figure you have on the total, is that what you're still at 226, roughly?
Shockingly, yes. Yeah, we've been a little nervous about that number because of all the additional work we had to do. But
the reason I was asking is down below where you have the elevator, braille, and also grab bars. So it looks like you're going to put some money into that elevator.
We are. Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the recommendation from, that we got from the Independent Living Resource Center. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I read Danny's letter. So
okay.
I trust her.
Mr. Chair, this would be a good opportunity for me to share a letter that one of our plans examiners received from Danny. It's undated, but I think it came in this week, or was it yesterday? Oh, okay, so last week? Okay. And I wasn't aware of it. I didn't receive a copy of it. I had received a copy of a similar letter for another site. So I'm going to hand this to the board. But essentially, Danny, who is the executive director of the Independent Living Resource Center, was concerned that they just need to look at their letter again, their decision again, and their letter again. So again, it's not a dated letter, and it doesn't give any specifics, but it is something that you should be aware of because it was submitted to one of our staff. I think it was in light of a conversation about the involvement of the Independent Living Resource Center, a broader discussion of, we've relied on them both as a city when we do city projects and private projects to give us some assistance in understanding the practical aspects of what's being proposed, even if it's not code compliant. And Danny's not opposed to that, but I think at one of their last board meetings or regular meetings that they had, she was kind of cautioned on, hey, you need to be careful on how much advice you're giving and what kind of liability that might bring to their organization. So she has good intent. She doesn't mean to give anybody the wrong impression or go back and forth, but she just needs to make sure that she's in line with the board. So.
I find it interesting. I got to say, I find it interesting that I don't get any of this stuff. I didn't see anything from the other person, whoever it was who made an objection, and I didn't see this before today. So that concerns me a little bit.
Concerns me too. I didn't either.
From a perspective of due process, I think
Yeah.
And we're trying to do in good faith the best that we can do here. And like I said, we take it very seriously that our patients are taken care of and well taken care of, because we are an independent group. We don't have the big Cottage name behind us. We don't have anything other than our reputation to rely on. And we, that's the lifeblood of what we do. And so we want to make sure people are treated well, and certainly, we have to deal with people with limited mobility every day. So.
So this morning is the first time I've seen this letter myself.
I just wish we could bring in the landlord into this discussion. I really do, Andrew. I mean, they're stuck. Essentially, they're paying rent and, dealing with an old building. And time for an upgrade, but it shouldn't be put on just one tenant in that. So I'm in a quandary.
Well, it sounds to me that there really is not an access problem. If you people are going to take people up there one way or another, you're going to get them up there. And I've been to Pueblo Radiology, unfortunately, several times.
HIPAA,
and I always had to go in and check in.
Right.
I don't remember getting an MRI where I walked right up to the machine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see where there's a problem.
Yeah, we want to make sure patients are not only checking in, but know where to go and, what's going to happen while they're there. I mean, it's not a process where we say, hey, nice to see you, head upstairs, So.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Wayne a question just
Yes.
on the record? So, and I was trying to find it in the letter that was drafted in response to from you to Christy back in February. But it seemed to me I read in here somewhere that the capacity of the equipment, the MRI equipment, limits the size of the person and the chair. There was some relationship between the capacity of the MRI equipment and the elevator that was sort of like, well, we could increase the size of the elevator, but when they get up to that level, there isn't going to be equipment to accommodate them and had to deal with people who were larger.
No, actually, we put the larger equipment on the ground floor.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to say is that
Yeah.
the limited size of the elevator cab was commensurate with the equipment that served people at the upper levels as opposed to the lower level
Correct.
that could accommodate people that were larger.
Yeah, just to give you kind of a sense of the layout, the big equipment, so to speak, or our CO calls it the big iron, because an MRI is a big giant magnet, right? It'd suck a Volkswagen off the street if it wasn't shielded. Those are on the ground floor, CT, MRI, which are the two big ones. And then the manufacturers of those pieces of equipment have a weight limit for those, and it's like 600 pounds. You have to be, pretty big before you hit the weight limit. But and just for sighting purposes, it's just so much better to have those on the ground floor than it is to have them up on. You don't want something that's that big that could fall through the roof, right? So got those on the ground floor. The services that will be provided on the second floor, like I said, are all kind of women's imaging things: ultrasound, mammography. And those pieces of equipment are small, right? Mammography and ultrasound are almost like a copy machine size, right? And really a lot easier to address accessibility issues with those pieces of equipment because you can position the patient, whereas to sort of fit the need. Whereas with the MRI, you've got to lie on the gurney and you're going into that gantry whether you want to or not if you're going to have the MRI. So there's a lot more flexibility with the type of equipment that we'll have on the second floor in this space, and I think it's about 1,800 square feet that we're remodeling. So it's not a huge office space, but we see about 10,000 women a year for our mammography services. So it's a substantial number of patients that will go through there, and we need to make it, like I said, it's got to be comfortable, accessible, private, all those things.
Mr. Chair, I had a few comments. My experience has largely been with the life safety elements of both the building and the fire codes for over 30 years. And I remember having a professor in school who said all of these things that we do with the codes, all of these accommodations for size, what have you, exit widths, so on and so forth, are all great. They're all great ideas until you add people to the equation. And so what we're doing right here is a lot of the same thing. We're counting on people to perform in a certain way. When we are looking at things, and it breaks my heart every time I vote contrary to Bonnie. I know the struggle she has. Just trying to get the freedom of movement is something so many of us take for granted. I'm not on a box here. I'm just trying to say that it's important that we realize that if we're going to rely on some mitigation, it's going to be a performance factor that's written into some business plan or what have you to overcome these things. It shouldn't be buried at the bottom of one of these pieces of paper that we had here. It needs to lead. It needs to be presented. These are the deficiencies of this building. This is what we're going to do about them. Now let's talk about the building. And, so we're taking this huge leap of faith that things are going to move as they should. Mm-hmm. As we all pray they will. And I just say that as we ratify these things, as we recognize that there are these hardships on both sides of the equation, that we have to manifest. We have to be real clear as to what it is we're approving and what we're not. So I think the questions that are being asked are, well, where is the building owner? Where are they on this? Where is the representative from the schools that is going to have to adhere to these things? Where are these people on these things? This is an appeal. This is important. This is involving people's time. We need to, their energies, their efforts, their dreams, and we need to see that in these presentations, if we could. Are we ready for a motion yet?
I am.
I think we can make a motion.
I make a motion to approve the ratification.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I didn't finish though. With the reservation that we
We can stop talking.
I know. With the fact that these mitigations are going to be manifested in an abundantly clear fashion. Can we get that from the?
Absolutely.
Bonnie, does this help at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone to Pueblo Radiology several times too, and it works. But I really wish we could force the landlord to be here, because this ain't right. It's not right. You guys are doing a great job and all that, but the building's got to be fixed. This is not okay. And it's got to be a burden on the landlord partly. At least I think it needs to be shared by everybody that rents there, and mostly the landlord. They own an old building.
Mr. Chair, if I could interject here. So
Yes.
just to remind the board of the board's authority, it isn't necessarily black and white, right? You don't have to say, yes, we approve it, no, we don't approve it. You can say, we do approve it with the following conditions. So some suggestions that the board could consider or keep in mind and maybe work from. You could approve the ratification of the hardship for this particular tenant and require the building owner require the building official to order the building owner to give us a schedule for improvement of the elevators.
Great.
And that way if your concern is that the property owner, the building owner, needs to address the elevator issue, that would relieve Pueblo Radiology from having this hanging over their head while they're doing their tenant improvement, but it would still keep the building owner in a position to have to respond. So that's a type of condition you could add if you're interested in doing that. And the motion could be withdrawn and remade, or you could have the motion amended. I would suggest withdrawing it and making a new motion if you do want to go in that direction.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to withdraw my motion. I would like to allow Bonnie to fabricate the motion that.
Lord. Let's see. I move to agree to a gratification. Is that okay? Sorry, I'm terrible at making motions.
We'll help you.
With the condition that the building official work with the landlord, talk to the landlord about the elevator issue.
Please order me to do that.
Or I'm ordering the building official to talk to deal with the building owner about the elevator. Talk to them about upgrading things like this. It needs to be brought into compliance. So with that, I'll move to accept the ratification to do this.
Mr. Chair, for clarification on the motion,
yeah.
Does the motion maker wish the building official to order the property owner to give us a schedule for how and when the elevator will be improved to meet current standards?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Bonnie, perhaps a constructive amendment, and also ask that the applicant provide clear-cut procedures for making these accommodations to accommodate people with limited access.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, these are pretty clear in here to me for wheelchairs, but yeah, they need some more information. Please sorry. I'd like to ask the applicant to give written information regarding how you're going to actually assist people, each patient to go upstairs and things like that. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll ask for clarification again. In the amended motion, that you have the applicant or the tenant, Pueblo Radiology, provide standard operating procedures for accommodating their clientele on the second level relative to the size of the elevator. Okay.
Thank you.
And I think we have a motion without a second.
I'll second Bonnie's motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We hope we don't see you, but if we do, it's a good experience.
Landlord with you. We want to talk to him.
Next item on the agenda is 510 North South Sepoy Street.
So, Mr. Chair, this is a little different than the items we've heard before today. This is an actual appeal, whereas the rest of the items were ratifications or rules of the board. In this instance, the way the order of the hearing goes is that the decision of the building department to issue the building permit stands, and that is the standing motion. So the board does not need to make a motion on this. What the board will do, they will hear the appellant's argument and the city's position. First they'll hear the city's position, then they'll hear the appellant's argument, and then after that 5 minutes, those 5 minutes are up for each of us. The board can ask for more information if they would like more information, and the standing motion will be to approve the building official's decision to issue the permit, and then the board can decide whether they want to approve that or not and continue the discussion if necessary. So I will open we have reviewed and I don't want to be too verbose, we've reviewed the documentation that was provided to us by Mr. Martinson. It's in our packet May 18th of 2016, and staff has confirmed that the permits were issued in accordance with all the applicable standards and codes relative to the complaints and concerns that were raised in that letter.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I've reviewed this, and I ask to be recused from the vote.
Okay. Do you believe there's a
I believe I might be conflicted, yeah.
Okay. So I think we've been advised that any board members that recuse themselves from an item due to possible conflict should probably step out of the room. You can welcome to sit in the hallway if you'd like.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You have to sit in the hallway if you recuse yourself, kind of like council steps off the dais. So.
Is there a nice, comfortable seat?
They're nice, comfortable wood chairs outside.
Okay.
And I believe we have the appellant before you, or a representative of the appellant.
Yes, I'm Trevor Martinson, architect, and the issues that we have here are still what Stanley Mendez, a well-known structural engineer over the years, presented to the City Council in 2014. And there are still 3 issues that are available for consideration, because we feel, and especially when we get to the retaining wall that is along the property line between Catholic Charities and the proposed development. And by the way, we're not against this development. We're just worried about the consequences of some of the construction that is going to occur. And this wall that we are so concerned about is shown here. And the problem that we have is, if you will look here, you'll notice that the reinforcing goes down but never connects into the footing at all. And in an earthquake, you are going to have this thing waving back and forth, and it's several hundred feet long. You are going to either have a failure right here or right here. and it is just simply going to fall on the children's playground. And we feel that this should be readdressed and redesigned. This is not a good wall. And I find it very difficult to imagine that the building department somehow managed to do this, because I can remember years ago when the city here in Public Works had Bob Sedovy, a real good structural engineer. And this man would have picked this up right away and said, hey, we got to do something about it. So that's our one issue that I have. The other issues that we have are, of course, flooding. And I have tried to address this flooding issue because, as I mentioned to the council, I said, this is a problem where we have a bathtub. We're at the bottom of the barrel here. And you put your body into that bathtub, which is this big dirt podium, where does that water go? It goes into a storm drain that unfortunately is not adequate to carry it. It's failed several times, and the city knows it. And the problem that we have here is that we're at elevation 10 feet. The bottom of this storm drain is about at 3. Well, what happens when we have high tides? And this 3 foot has to slope all the way to the ocean. Many times, high tide prevents anything from happening, and the city tries through pumps to get this water out. It hasn't worked, and there's failures. So we feel concerned that the project should retain 100% of the water that it's displacing rather than the 5% that they say they only have to. And remember, this is a big, big 150 acres or more of property. And they said we're raising the water just a quarter of an inch. Well, you take that 150 acres and you tilt it, and we're at the bottom of the barrel, there's going to be a hell of a lot of water. And this is our concern. And the other final thing here, and Dr. Posch will come and talk also, is that we feel that there is some contamination still on the site. And we watched the construction of the excavation, and we did see shiny black soil coming up, which means that's lamp black. And we've mentioned this to the county, and at the suggestion of the city attorney, that we address this issue as well. Thank you.
I don't understand the 150 acres. It's only the project itself. This is the one that runs from South Sepulvedes up Laguna Street to Coda?
Right.
Yeah, well, I own a building on Gutierrez and Nova,
right.
So I'm familiar with the area. That's not 150 acres.
Oh, no. What they've done is, this is the floodplain, the entire area that goes up toward Milpas. All of this is the water that is coming down here, and that's the 150 acres that I'm referring to. They said we're only adding a quarter of an inch of water in this, but once you tilt that 150 acres to the bottom, you're going to get a lot more water.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
But I think
Mr. Posch, could you just have a seat? We'll call you up in just a minute.
That comes down from the Riviera through there?
Yes, all of it. There's a lot more than what there.
But that's a pressure storm drain, because they bolt those manhole covers down.
Right, yeah.
Talk into the microphone.
They bolt those manhole covers down. So was this storm drain going to tie into that storm drain?
It does. It ties in. It comes all the way down. The Riviera contributes a lot of water, which is not part of this 150-acre floodplain.
And that used to cause, because I went to Santa Barbara Junior High, we get flooded out.
Hey, you definitely. Kayak time.
My question is, how could you, this would be a gravity storm drain out of this?
Yes.
Wouldn't the gravity pressure would be less than the pressure exerted from the Riviera, so it'd back up, wouldn't it?
It will back up, but will come up through this storm drain opening. And that's why they've had this flooding many times. And Dr. Posch of course, has experienced this over the 30 years. So that's our concern. We're not against the project. We just feel that there has to be special conditions put on this project to protect the adjacent neighbors. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I need to make sure the board understands the scope of its authority. So Planning Commission would be the board or commission that would hear conditions on a project. Your conditions that you can place on a project relative to a decision of my office has to be limited to the Title 24 building standards enforced by my office or the National Flood Insurance Program floodplain management provisions that are in Federal Code of Regulations 60 something or other. Craig probably knows 64, 66, I don't know. Yeah, 63. There you go. So that's the relative area that you're going to exercise discretion in. Storm drainage is not in the National Flood Insurance Program. And it's often confused because people think of when it rains, the storm drains fill up and I flood. So obviously storm drains should be part of the National Flood Insurance Program. There is no requirement in the National Flood Insurance Program for the installation, maintenance, or improvement of storm drains. There are requirements when you build in a floodway or in a floodplain, and this property is in a flood zone, and we have made sure that they comply with those requirements. Oddly, those requirements will allow you to elevate allow the base flood elevation to go up slightly when you put your project in, as long as you elevate your project above. So this is not a very intuitive set of regulations, and we've tried to advise the appellant and others. This is a kind of a common question we get: storm drainage versus floodplain management. So I can assure you that we have confirmed that it meets all the National Flood Insurance floodplain management construction requirements. I cannot assure you, and it is not my responsibility nor the discretion of the board, to assure that the stormwater management features have been adequately addressed. That was done at Planning Commission with Public Works input.
Okay, if I can close then, I really feel that there are issues here that need to be addressed, and they have not been addressed, and I would suggest that this be postponed to another meeting. I think it's important for staff, and especially I think Mr. Mendez, he was going to come down to your last meeting, and it was canceled almost before the meeting, and we stopped him from coming down. But this is an important issue, and I think it should be addressed by the board and the city. I think Dr. Post should be allowed down.
That's up to the board, if the board would like to hear any more.
Sure. Yeah, we'd like to. I did have a question. How tall is that wall? That wall that
15 feet.
Andrew, I placed, I don't know what I can say and what I can't. So if you'll be kind with me, I'll be trying to go ahead and help these people. I speak for a number of people that are on Haley Street in South Sepulveda. I've been there since 1973. I've went through every flood that we can have. I wear my boots and put them in my car. They're in my car all the time when I'm down there. It's a problem. I don't know what I can. You tell me when I'm saying the wrong thing. But I went ahead and thought I would learn about that of
Mr. Chair, let me just, so you have 5 minutes, so you know how to meter your time, and you can talk about anything you want relative to the item.
Can I talk about that of the soil and the soil stuff?
You can talk about anything you want to talk about.
Legal for me to say that to them?
Everything in 5 minutes, you can talk about any topics you'd like.
Okay.
I'll remind, if you talk about something that isn't in the discretion of my office or the board, I'll let the board know when you're done. So go ahead and share your concerns. And
I'm going to start out by that of what I've observed over there when they were grading. One of the first days of grading, I went ahead and looked over the top of the fence, and they had an area open along Haley Street. When I went ahead and looked at that, it looked ugly. It was black as could be, and we had 4 feet of that of beautiful dirt on the top, and then all of a sudden this other kind of dirt. It looked like maybe lamp black. I've never seen it before, and that is a carcinogen. What happens is that I went ahead and went on home thinking that I might go ahead and take a picture of that area, and all of a sudden when I come back, there was a small layer of dirt, so you couldn't see it. I called to that of the county. The county said, well, we don't want to come out and look. I just think that there's families here, and families need to go ahead and be protected. Kids need to be protected. Across the street at MTD, they have lamp black over there, and I had public officials tell me that of lamp black is on the other side. I have an affidavit that you have right there from one of the last tenant. Have you seen it? No? Yes? Did you already read it? Did somebody pass it to you? It was that of handwritten, and then he typed it about he actually rented this property. When he rented the property, he went ahead and got sick. He got that of all kinds of smells and odors. It was the Quonset that's over there. And nobody's found anything. Is somebody covering up something? I don't know. My final thing is that of across the street at MTD, in order to go ahead and have their two-story building, and this is where Stan Mendes comes in, and that's why I hired him, that if they have 60-foot pylons. They're 60 feet in the ground. We don't even have pylons on your property or on the city's property. City doing city products that if I just think there's no checks and balances, and Andrew will probably think different, but I think we need a different method and a different approach. My final thing is, I do think that if you guys are going to flood me out, just like Trevor Martin says, that if it's like a bathtub. And what happens is, you talked about that at 150 acres, when Craig Stewart is here, right here, and maybe he can come up and explain it to you, but that if they took the water that was in that 1 acre place, probably 3.5 acre feet, and spread it over the entire 150 acres. Is that the way water works? No. It comes down that of Haley Street, it comes down that of Coda Street, it comes down South Sepulvedas to the lowest point. Now there's a new low, and I think the new low is me, my neighbors, and my friends, businesses. A large number of those people are on a tightrope. They're trying to make a buck and stay in business, and I think the city's going to take their business away. Did I make my 5 minutes or not?
I think you still have a minute left.
I'd like to end with one thing, and I don't know if you guys like it or not, but I thought I was going to learn about that of how business works, and it turns my stomach the way this thing goes. Nobody has ever thought of our East Side people. Even at that of the groundbreaking, which I went to, they talked about how good they're doing, but forgot about us. And lastly, when I went to go to the city council, I know how important this building is. When I went to the city council for an appointment with one of the council members, at the end of our conversation, the particular person went ahead and went to me and was in between 4 and 5 inches of my face. And the comments were, "We are building this building." I don't like it. I think she should have had more. I'm sorry I let it out who it was, but she should have had more information, and I'm learning the results of that of city doing city stuff. I just wish that you guys think about that of the flood situation, and think about us. They eliminated the parking stuff. We eliminated everything. We got a 41-foot building
Mr.
in a
Chair,
place.
5 minutes, so if you'd like to allow more, you can. It's up to you.
Well, give me
Let
one
you
minute.
finish. Yeah, give it
Thank you. I thank you very much. It's got to be a passion for me, and I just don't like big people going ahead and beating on my neighbors and friends. And I wish that of maybe Craig Stewart could come up and explain to you what he thinks that of this particular flood thing is going to do. But I have observed that of this channel, that all the water from all the areas goes into that channel. It's full. How much more water can you get when it's already full? You can't. Where's it going to go? Flood the neighborhood. Anything above that much more than where your protection is a flood, and it's going to cost these people bucks. I really thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I didn't get your name, sir.
My name is Arthur Posh. I am a veterinarian and been a veterinarian, and it's P-O-S-C-H. I'm a veterinarian that's come here at 73 and spent my entire career.
Question: You just this? Do you
Yes, sir.
own the old White Animal Hospital?
Yes, I do. And I sold the old whites, and then I went ahead and took on a project of dealing with where I probably shouldn't be, and the city's going to win no matter what. They have it all pegged, and I'm sorry to say I'm probably going to get hurt, and our neighbors are going to get hurt. But I think that if you guys can have these people look down the street. No, I'm not supposed to say anything more, but thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, my question is, what are we? Seems like this is out of the scope of our decisions here. This is something that belongs in planning or city council. Or I've never thought that the Building Appeals Board would supposed to be concerned with floodplains and dirty earth and the rest of this that's going on.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Board Member Wood, my office enforces Title 24 building standards, which are pretty common topics of conversation for us at our meetings, and also the National Flood Insurance Program's construction requirements to prevent flooding. So relative to flood compliance with the Federal Code of Regulations, I think it's Act 44 CFR something or other 63, yada, yada, yada. We've confirmed that it meets those requirements. Those requirements don't address storm drainage, which I've explained before is not part of our realm, and that's not part of the board's discretion. The soils contamination is not a topic for the board to take up. Those are conditions that are placed on the project when they do their environmental assessment during the planning process and before planning commission. And when we find soils, and occasionally they're not found when they do borings, and they find them when they do excavation. They find contaminated soils, and it is a requirement in the conditions of approval of the City Planning Commission that if they find them, they have to disclose them and they have to abate them correctly, and they do that through the Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District and Environmental Health Department. And our building inspectors will be akin to that as they go out and do their foundation inspections and see reports of the soils. We do know in the soils reports for this project that in their borings that they did for their soils reports, they found trash. That's why they had to do an over-excavation of 4 feet, was because they couldn't rely on the materials. Because there were foreign materials in the soil, they couldn't rely on that soil for structural capacity. So we do know that there's trash there and debris, the extent of which is never known until you actually start doing your grading. And I've talked about how that gets disclosed. The retaining wall is probably the only question that's been brought up this morning that really is pertinent to that and the floodplain management requirements, construction requirements that are pertinent to the board today. So when you look at the retaining wall, if in your opinion the retaining wall needs additional engineering, or you would like confirmation of that from a state licensed engineer, we can send that detail out and the calculations out to a third-party structural engineer and have them review it and provide us with a letter and assessment of the compliance, structural compliance for that wall and retaining system.
But these plans haven't been approved by the city yet, have they?
Those, I don't see an approval stamp on them. Yeah. Do you see? I haven't looked at the plans, so I don't see it. They'd be on every sheet, so you'd see it on the cover sheet.
Yeah, I don't.
So those are, like I say, that's what's been presented by Mr. Martinson, and we'll take that and compare it to the approved plans. And if they're the same, then we can send it out to an engineer for an assessment. And if they aren't, then we can make note of that and return those findings to the board. Because we want to make sure that the structural capacity of all the systems being put in place are adequate.
It's a 15-foot block wall, isn't that right?
That's what it looks like is depicted there. I haven't looked at that particular plan.
I'd like to make a motion that we do send this wall detail out to a structural engineer to evaluate. It shouldn't take him more than an hour of calculations. I don't think it would be that. It would just be nice to get another opinion. So I make a motion we do that. I can see where the rebar down here is tied into the rebar in the footing on this side. So that looks, but I don't know if he's got enough steel up in the middle of this, so therefore I make a motion that we send this out to a structural engineer and get a second opinion.
Okay, for sense of order, so the motion is that before the board right now is to uphold the decision of the building official to issue the permit, or to overturn the decision of the building official to issue the permit for the entire construction project. Right? This is all about the whole construction project, more than just the retaining system. You can find in favor of the building official's decision to issue the permit. You can overturn the building official's decision to issue the permit. You can do either. Well, you can do find in favor and add a condition to have a retaining wall system looked at again to make sure that it's structurally sound in its design. I would advise the board to consider the magnitude of withholding, of overturning a decision to issue the entire building permit for the whole project, because that will put the whole project on ice while we look at a small aspect of it relative to the retaining wall. I would encourage the board to add a condition for us to do that would enable the project to move forward. But that's at the discretion of the board.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't want to hold the project over, and the retaining wall will be something that'll be built downstream from where they are now. So I'll make a motion that we approve the project as approved by the building department with the condition that the retaining wall be sent to a licensed structural engineer to check the design, and if he recommends a little change in the design with respect to the rebar or whatever else is needed structurally, that be incorporated in the building permit.
That's the motion. I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
There you go. Thank you, board. Appreciate it. Mr. Chair, I think you're at a point where you can wrap up. I think that was our last item. So,
let me go grab it.
Mr. Martinson, will you please leave those for us so that I can compare that to our approved drawings?
Yeah, I can see this part here, but this is where the shear can take
We need to adjourn the meeting first, Mr. Chair.
I was going to go grab Jim.
Yeah. Is he?
I can't find him.
Okay.
At this point, I would move to adjourn the meeting.
And I'll second the motion. Bonnie.
Okay. Thank you, Bonnie. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah, that's